city states where like there's different cities and you're not from a country, you're from a city, right? And so you're called, whatever you're called is the name of that city. Like I brought up in the Greek world, if you're from Sparta, you were Spartan. You're not Greek, you're Spartan. You're from Athens, you're Athenian, right? Things like that. But this is a really good, has really good weather here. So they had a lot of rainfall, so they were able to grow lots of different crops. And we talked about, it's actually kind of a melting pot of different cultures too, because they just people just move into the area, and so they just have different, features, in this region culturally. We talked about Phoenicia, which is in Lebanon now. It's that purple area up there. Phoenicians are known for their alphabet, which looks like this, right? This is the first one to have sound-based letters. As you can see what sound those letters would make, next to it. Look at the M. That looks pretty close, right? The M looks pretty close. And we actually get our alphabet. Actually, if you think about it, right, because our language, English, comes from, we have a lot of words from Greek and from Latin, and those languages came from the Phoenician alphabet. So in hindsight, you can see that we actually speak, we have a Phoenician influence on our language too. They practiced, they were polytheistic, okay? They had like this type of agricultural religion here where they would worship their gods for rain, for their crops, and this and that. They would practice sacrifices and other, what's the word? Debauchery things, from the temple, right? So we can see when the Israelites started to grow there, all the struggles that they had with those different religions. So this area was actually really into international trade, especially from the Phoenician side, right? We talked about what commerce was, which you guys already know all that stuff. And the best way to transfer goods back then was by water, right? So they would use the Mediterranean Sea or all those major rivers there, like the Nile River, the Tigris, and the Euphrates rivers. Indus River is in like India, Pakistan area, but that was still a major one, okay? And the Phoenicians were really good at building boats. They were great boat builders. They're very sturdy. They could go off the shore, like they could leave the coast, right, and go in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. We talked about that when we looked at Ezekiel 27. It shows all these different parts from different parts of the known world that come to Phoenicia, and they build the ships there. They also had the best sailors too. We also talked about this is a very rich region, right? Phoenicia was very rich, especially with their purple dye, right? We had talked about so there's their trade routes that they would take. You can see it mostly along the coast, but then you can actually see them going into the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, right? There's the boats, what they could have looked like back then. They even had fire boats. They built boats specifically to ram into other boats and catch them on fire. It was pretty crazy. And then there's the purple dye. It was the only place in the world where you could get purple. So it's very expensive. It came from little snails that they would that are in the Mediterranean Sea. It took thousands of them to make just 1 ounce. So it was very expensive, like buying a diamond ring, right? Very expensive. Only royalty could obviously afford these types of things. And that's why today we hardly see any purple on flags, because it was too expensive. I can only think of 2 that have purple on them. One of them is in the Caribbean. What's it called? Anyway, it has a purple parrot on it. There's a purple parrot. All right, so I can't go back now. Is he back there?
Yeah, Nathan's back there.
Nathan, can you go back a slide? Thank you. Oh, never mind. I was done with that slide. So, anyways, lots. It's very rich here. They have lots of money. So they're not those primitive, raw meat eating, non-dead bearing people that the Mesopotamians thought that they were. We talked about this really quick, right? So in this age, there's actually a lot of advancement through the military, because they're using bronze now, right? Bronze is a sturdier metal than wood and sticks and stones and things like that. They actually started to develop chariots during this time, and actually they came out shortly after Abraham was born, which was around 2166 BC. So they've been around for a long time. They were they're very, very light, very lightweight. It could be 2 or 4 wheels. And they have this, I don't know how tall that they were. They have this half, waist high semicircular guard in front of them, okay? To help the guard. So you had 2 people on it. One would drive it and then I'll get to that part later on. But they were used in warfare, but also for travel. And when cavalry started to being used in warfare, the chariot just kind of went out because cavalry is much easier to maneuver than chariots, right? Yeah. But even though if you saw a chariot in battle, that was a tank back then, right? That was a tank. And then they eventually were used for entertainment purposes, like in Ben-Hur right here, right? Great scene, by the way. This scene was awesome. You want to know how I did that, Jeffrey?
I'm very impressed you're doing this.
It's just a GIF. You just search for GIFs and copy and paste it. There you go. I used to be in school a lot. Yeah. GIF or GIF. I call them GIFs. Some people call them GIFs, but I think they're wrong. There you go. GIF is peanut butter. GIF is this clip right here. And of course, this is like a Roman thing, right? But hold on, Gene. This is there's nothing beats going to watch people possibly die in a horse race, right? That's nothing beats it. Yes, Gene. I believe it. Yeah, for sure. So then chariots were then just used mainly for kings, right? Transport kings in the battle. They're probably standing in the back, on their chariot, watching all their guys fight up there. But then it was also a mobile platform for archers like this. All right, so one guy would drive it. You can kind of see him back there. Then one guy would shoot arrows. They probably had little quivers on both sides, But you had to be pretty good, I think, to be an archer in a chariot. Actually, the biggest chariot battle ever was when Egypt invaded somewhere. I think it was the Hittites. The biggest chariot battle ever, and Egypt won. So Egypt got control of all of that right there. I forget which. I think it was during the Old Kingdom. Anyways, so then they mostly fought with infantry, though. Those guys on foot, like spearmen. They would form in a big old phalanx like this, kind of a big square, have the spears pointed out to make them look mean and nasty, right? So if you're on cavalry, or if you're on a horse, you don't want to charge into that because that horse is not going to make it. Chariots too, though. Well, chariots were probably different because then they'd put like spikes on their wheels, and so you guys ever watch Gladiator? If you watch Gladiator, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so also Egypt started to domesticate cats during this time. They would use them to catch snakes and other little pests around there. And this was by the time Jacob, right, was living in Canaan. So cats have been around for a long time too as pets. So anyone here a cat fan? Cats? Of course you are, Kathy, of course. Okay. We're also seeing a lot of now slavery. I'm assuming has been here since when Adam and Eve were alive too, I think. But we know that in the story in Genesis 37, 12 through 36, Joseph is sold into slavery, right? His brothers toss him in the pit, and those guys from those merchant guys come traveling around. They're from Egypt, and they sell him to him because they thought it was because they were mad at him. And then he rose into a leadership position and relocated his extended family to Egypt. That's in chapters 39 through 41. Okay, and he moved them probably because of the famine coming, right? He had predicted or interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and he said there's a famine coming. So that's probably why his family came to Egypt. So if we look at Genesis 41, 46 through 47 there, okay, we got time to read these, right? We got to have some Bible time here. Oh, I don't want to open that. I hate it when you get like a notification, but you want to click on something at the top, and it goes to that instead of what you wanted to go to. All right, Genesis, let's go. Genesis 41. Whoever gets there first can read it. 46 through 57. Hold on, I'm in the wrong chapter. Wait. Okay. Whoever's there can go. Can read it.
Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. And during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and placed the food in the cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Now before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore to him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And he named the second Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction.
So then, but that's good. To 57. Oh, that's fine. We can stop there. That's fine. No. That's fine. That's good enough. So, I mean, also then we also see there, like, he named them specifically, right? We talked about that last week or so, when the names meant something, right? All right, so we can see that Pharaoh trusted him to go throughout his lands and store up all these grains, right? That's a big deal, right? So much, they couldn't even count how much it was, right? It was way too much. If we go to Genesis 45, 17 through 28, we even see that this wasn't even Joseph's idea. So let's read this and see whose idea was it to have Joseph bring his family there. Mike, you got it? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell your brothers, do this. Load your animals and return to the land of Canaan. And bring your father and your families back to me. I will give you the best land of Egypt. You can enjoy the fat of the land. You are also directed to tell them, do this. Make some carts for Egypt for your children and your wives, and give your father a cup. Never mind that about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours.
28.
So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them carts as Pharaoh had commanded. He also gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave their clothes. But to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothing. And this is what he sent to his
Yeah, Pharaoh told him, "You get your family and bring them back here." Right? That's a big deal. Right? That's a big deal. And he said, "They don't have to pack their stuff. I will give them everything that they need." Isn't that crazy? That's how high up and how trusted he was. And then if we go to Genesis 47, chapter 47, 13 through 31, this is his plan for the famine, right? So this was after he told, I'm assuming it because I didn't go back and check it, but I'm assuming this is after Pharaoh's dream, and Joseph has already interpreted that dream as saying there's going to be a big famine. So this is his plan to deal with it. So we can read that. Someone who's a good, way better reader than I am can read that. Is Brent here? Brent, you there?
There was no food because of the whole region, because of the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan and in payment of the grain they were buying. And he brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the money and the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die because before your eyes your money is used up?" Then being your livestock, said Joseph. "Bring me your livestock," said Joseph. "I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock. Since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep, their goats, their cattle, and donkeys. And he brought them through that year with food in exchange for all their livestock. You going?
Sure.
When the year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from your Lord the fact that since your money is gone and your livestock belongs to you, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish because before your eyes? We and our land
So go ahead, go through 31.
Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Logan. They acquired property there and were faithful and fruitful and increased greatly in number. Joseph lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called to his son Joseph and said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, put your hand under my thigh and promise that you will not show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not warn me from Egypt, but when I rest with your father, carry me out to Egypt and bury me where they found where they are buried. Do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my father, carry me out of Egypt and bury me with they who are buried where they are buried. I will do as you say, he said. Swear to me, he said. Then Joseph swore to him, and Israel worshipped as he learned lean on the top of his staff.
So how did the Israelites become slaves to Pharaoh? They didn't have any food, right? So they're like, we can only offer you our land and our bodies. So he's like, okay, I will buy your land from you, but you got to work for Pharaoh now, right? 1/5 of all your grain and seed stuff got to go to Pharaoh, but then you keep the other fourth, right? The other 4/5, right? And so that's how because at this time it was pretty much Egypt along the Nile, right, and then all the way up along the east coast of the Mediterranean to Canaan and probably up through like Phoenicia, all that kind of stuff, right? Now that belonged to Egypt now, all of that right there, okay? So this is why, even though it's Canaan, it's still a part of Egypt back then, okay? So they pretty much were like, help us, and we'll do anything to help for that, right? So now, come on, people, there you go. So now, a lot of Israelites are living in Egypt at this time, and you saw they're doing very well, right? They don't really have their own property anymore. They're pretty much all servants of Pharaoh, but they're doing fairly well. They're doing good. But after Joseph's death at 147, right? Can you imagine that? 147, Mike? Yeah. The new king, I don't know his name, by the way. The book didn't say that. The new king did not like the potential threat of the growing Israelite population. So now he is actually turning them into actual slaves, right? Right now they're just serving Pharaoh, right? Because they're giving their they're giving their tax or their tithe, right? That 1/5 to Pharaoh. But he's like, I'm going to make sure they are under control, right? So now this guy puts them into slavery. So while the Israelites were being enslaved, Egypt was actually going through a period of literary advancement, okay? And this grew out of their religious beliefs, okay? We talked about that with mummification and all that kind of stuff, right? And they had multiple gods. They were polytheistic. Also, their literacy stuff also came from to address man's ordinary, just day-to-day life, right? It was viewed as a source of possible spiritual nourishment as well as entertainment. So they had like novels. They were writing just novels. They were writing short stories and poetry. They had folklore, a lot of proverbs, wise sayings. In Mike's case, it'd be wise cracking sayings, right? A lot of moral teachings, philosophical meditations, and other literary messages. Actually, there's this one here called the Admonitions of Ipuwer. And I had to look it up and show you and tell you guys. So this here was this is from the Old Kingdom. Okay, so this is when Egypt was united, right? Upper and Lower Egypt was now one. Okay, this was actually where'd it go? I'm on the wrong spot. Hold on. This is actually the earliest example of a natural disaster genre, where it talks about it puts chaos versus order, and so this is it talks about how let's see here, in which chaos reigns and order has been forgotten. Traditional roles in respect for that order are discarded, and death and destruction are imminent. So this is what this little book is about. They actually compare this to like the biblical books of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and Psalms. Maybe this had influence on those books. I don't know. But it's just similar to those books, okay? And other, like other wisdom literature, like in Lamentations, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Job. So it's actually pretty similar to some of our biblical books. All right. One here. So while Egypt is growing, right? Egypt is going through a lot of cultural advancements, and while the Israelites are becoming slaves, Mesopotamia is not doing too well at this point. Remember, I mentioned after the flood, what did Noah say he was going to put in place for the people, for the world? Or should I say this? What was missing from the world during Noah's time? We knew it was very wicked, right? So what was missing, do you think? Maybe we'll get to it in a minute. If you're in my class on Wednesday, you should know. Where's he at? It was Bill. Bill's not even here. Jeez, I taught a class Wednesday night, and you guys should have been there. All right. Anyway, so the world is changing, while Israelites are slaves, right? Like I said, Mesopotamia was unstable, and they're just in a constant state of war, okay? A lot of leaders sought to expand and just gather these different cities to help expand their empires, okay? Guys, what was missing was order, right? And there's no fixed laws for people to follow, right? So God said, I'm going to make sure that to put some laws in order for people to follow. And again, right, we're talking about secular history and sacred history, right? They sometimes meet, right? They meet and they both lead to this redemptive history, which is, we said this is God's plan, right? All the way through Revelation, through Jesus coming back. So God had this guy named King Hammurabi. Okay, he inherits the throne of Babylon around 1792 BC. Okay, his power grew through conquering all these little small cities around this area. But then, when he was kind of made a name for himself, he was able to pretty much just leverage his name into people agreeing to swear allegiance to him. So he kind of went down on the bloodshed there, right? And soon he ruled over the entire southern part of Mesopotamia. So, that's him right there. There's his little statue of him right there. Good beard. Good beard. Right there. So this is the Empire of Babylonia. Okay. So like Ur's down there. So all that is part of this Babylonian Empire. Oop, can you go back? I wasn't done yet. Who's back there? Can you go back a slide? again, click back a couple times. One more time. There you go. Thank you. So now Babylon is born, right? Babylonia is born, and we all know, we've all heard of that word before, or that name. By the way, in Genesis 14, Hammurabi could have been this guy named King Amraphel in Genesis, who captured Lot. But then Abraham got him back and messed things up for him. So that's a possibility there. So let me go back now. There we go. All right. So instead of using military force and might, right, to establish his rule, he decides to create a rule of law that everyone should follow. He said that this god Marduk, which is this handsome guy right there, okay? Hopefully it disappears. It does. Okay, good. Said that he was the guy who's supposed to, he said that chief god gave him power to rule over these people, but in a fair way, fairly. That justice would take a high priority in his empire. And he established a set of laws that everyone was required to follow. Okay? And that's a little sculpture of Hammurabi and his thing there. This is actually on top, on the top of what we're going to be doing next. So he came up with this thing called the Code of Hammurabi. Anyone ever heard of that before? Code of Hammurabi? It was meant to make an efficient rule, right? So it is considered one of the earliest written civil codes, 282 laws. It applied to everyone in the land, rich, poor, free, or slave, but the rich it wasn't enforced on the rich as much as the poor, as you probably would assume. It covered topics from family life and civil responsibility, among other things, right? And this thing was 7 feet tall. That's even taller than Jesse, right? He's just a tad taller than I am. So this is pretty tall, okay? And you can see all the language on there. So this is what everyone had to follow. Now his code is based off of this principle called lex talionis, which is Latin for the law of retribution. Okay? If a person committed a crime, a similar crime would be taken against them. Okay? Once that like action was taken, there was no allowance for reciprocation. So, for example, if a man killed another man, the child of the murderer would be killed. Okay? However, the murderer would not be allowed to reciprocate this act and kill anyone else. So the goal was to detour future wrongdoers, since potential offenders knew what was coming for them, right? So let's look at, I have several examples here, okay? So if a man kills another man's son, his son shall be cut off, okay? Meaning like he's not getting his inheritance, which is a big deal back then. If anyone ensnares another for a crime which he cannot prove, then he that ensnared him shall be put to death. If someone cuts down a tree on someone else's land, they shall pay for it. If anyone brings an accusation of any crime before the elders and does not prove that he has been that what he has charged, he shall, if a capital offense is charged, be put to death. You're going to see a trend here. But some of them seem kind of fair, right? If you cut down my tree, you're going to pay for it, right? If a builder builds a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which was built falls in and kills its owner, then the builder shall be put to death. There's also a variant of this where if the owner's son dies, then the builder's son will be put to death. Because, hey, fair's fair, right? If a son slaps his father, his hand shall be cut off. I think, Jesse, you like that one? I don't have any sons, so I can't speak to that. If a robber is caught breaking a hole into a house so that he can get in and steal, then he shall be put to death in front of that hole. Okay? We see a nice trend here, right? If anyone steals the young of another, he shall be put to death. If someone is careless when watering his fields and he floods someone else's fields by accident, he will pay for the grain that he has ruined. That seems fair, right? That seems pretty fair. If a man strikes a pregnant woman, thereby causing her to miscarry and die, the assailant's daughter shall be put to death. If a man puts out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Right? So, a lot of, if you wrong me, I'm going to put you to death. But at least they're not doing it by their own hand, right? Hey, fair's fair, okay? That's what he thought. So at the core of all Hammurabi's codes is the execution of justice, or literal execution. Hammurabi believed that the best way to rule a nation was to establish laws that preserved and protected justice in the preamble in his codes. He stated that one of the goals of his laws was to make sure that the strong do not overpower the weak. Okay? So, how do his codes compare to Moses' laws?
It's the classic, like, the code of Hammurabi is reflected in the laws of Moses. They call it the eye for eye, tooth for tooth thing. I mean, that's how it was stated in the laws of Moses. It was basically the same principle. It's like you hold people accountable for the actions that they do by
Right.
saying, as you do, so will it be done to you.
Right, yeah. So the laws of Moses were like more than just a legal code, right? It spoke to sin and responsibility to God, right? The Hammurabi's code does not do this. It's more of like focused exclusively on like criminal behavior, right? And civil laws, right? Things like that. And yeah, they had some brutal punishments, right? So probably not completely fair, but it helped back then, right? So in Genesis 1, I know that I'm late, but I really want to finish this out. Genesis 1, 26 through 27 says that every human is created in the image of God, thus bearing the mark of the Creator. One of the moral traits of the Creator is justice. So this code does kind of bring a sort of justice, right? This is kind of going towards God's plan, right? So this is why our early moral codes are found around the world and have a justice at their core. So this is not a Western thing, right? This has been around since, ancient, biblical times. And of course, after the Tower of Babel, things are shown in different ways, right? Because now there's different cultures around the world. So if you go to a different country, try to steal that man's wife and see what happens, right? It won't be as fair as it is here. Yeah, go ahead.
Interestingly enough, they have what they would call in modern day act of God clauses as well. One of them said, like, if you owe a debt to somebody, the debts were usually paid in grain or actual goods, and like bad storms and all that stuff destroyed all your crops that year, you would not be due the debt for that year, and you would not have to pay interest on it the following.
Well, that sounds nice. That sounds really nice. So he did some other things to help out with crops and things like that, but I'm going to skip that part. Let's reflect really quickly. So the world has experienced major developments during this time, right? It shaped all societies up to now during the time of Abraham and his descendants. Egypt became a superpower. Canaan developed agriculturally. Hammurabi established the rule of law in Babylonia. We can see God's imprint on the world. Mankind is seeking justice and order. Humans are using skills God gave them to subdue the world. We also see wars, conflicts, and misery that sin brought. And despite God dividing the world, man still is on the quest for some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose on this in this world, right? Attempt to deal with sin and a desire for justice. So we can really see during this time the world's really taking shape. And I'm going to pause until the summer for chapter 3. So.